what I see is a company that's being hollowed out, one that's being subverted and infiltrated and converted into a front group of this. You can call them the globalists, you can call them the Illuminati, you can call them the insiders or the network of global corporate control. We're all referring to these oligarchs, these apex oligarchs that are trying to seize control of the entire country. And they're doing it from the high, lofty rooftops of their central banking facilities.
It's like you can't teach people about the corruption of this country without them understanding the Federal Reserve. It's really it's one of the cornerstones, at least for this part of history, this American contribution to this global elite corruption, right? Every agenda from population control to surveillance to switching everything over to a one world, very well monitored system. I mean, think about all the boxes, this whole mess that we've been in for a year and a half. It just checks every single one. The fear alone is going to keep people from meeting and having, babies. Okay. These guys are, you're talking trillions. You're talking Zuck and these guys. They kiss their ring when they meet these people, and they never get to meet them in public, and they know better than to speak their name. That's how powerful these other families are.
What's scary is that they put into stone the directive as the first rule of the Georgia Guidestones to bring the population to 500 million in perpetual balance with nature.
Yeah, I know.
So
it's just
with everything that you see happening here with the pandemic, does it seem like that goal's getting closer to being achieved or further?
Welcome to Far Out with Faust. I'm Faust Chicho, and today I'm sitting here with Zach Vorhies, who you may have heard of. Let me tell you a little bit about him in case you've forgotten where that name came from. Zach was a senior software engineer at YouTube and Google for 8.5 years. He was working on all kinds of projects there, and he did really well for them. While he was working there, he realized that Google was censoring what it was calling fake news, but he also realized and learned that Google was censoring actual events as fake news. And he realized they had an AI system in place that was going to reclassify the entire internet according to the company's corporate cultural values, which have become very political, in case you've been on the moon. In 2019, Zach resigned from Google, taking with him 950 pages of Google's internal documents and delivering them to the Department of Justice. And through Project Veritas, he informed the public of Google's extensive censorship program. Zach, thank you so much for being me and brother. I appreciate your time, and I'm thrilled to be talking to you.
Faust, thank you for having me on. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Awesome.
It's a pleasure to be able to do all this.
Very cool, man. Dude, before we go forward, you got a foreword on your book by RFK Jr. I love that guy. That's so fucking cool. He's just, I don't have a lot of heroes in this life, but I can definitely say that RFK Jr. is one of them. He's the man. He just continues to face off against, Goliath over and over. So that's so cool, man.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get a chance to meet him?
Oh yeah, we've met several times, and I've helped him out with his cases. He needed testimony against Facebook, and the documents he was looking to get authenticated versions of was from the disclosure that happened with Project Veritas. So I connected them with the right people, and their lawyers got a hold of the documents, and that's still working its way through the court. So we've been helping each other out. And when I reached out for forward, he just jumped on it.
That's so cool, man. So you have been roped into fighting the good fight, and that's fantastic. Very cool, man.
You know what? It's really surprising that it fell to me. What Google was doing was so, obviously evil that there should have been 10 people ahead of me.
Yeah.
If not 100 lining up saying, we're going to blow the whistle on this. This is really evil. But for some reason, it came to me, a very imperfect individual who had to, who basically didn't want to live in the world that they were building. And
Yeah.
I have this component where I think about the future a lot. And I was almost like doing like chess pieces in my head. And I was like, okay, if Google's evil and they're like the largest repository of AI, then that means that their AI is going to be evil, right? And so I really saw this future where Google and the big tech giants would essentially seize the means of cultural control in not just the United States, but in extension, the world. And as I started researching on Google, I started uncovering facts that really, were surprising, like the role in flipping Egypt during their little Arab Spring and getting the Muslim Brotherhood into that. Turns out that there was a Google employee that did that.
Wow.
And
I wasn't even aware of that. I mean,
yeah,
I know about, go ahead, finish what you're saying.
I mean, and the media just says it matter of factly, like it comes out and they're like, oh yeah, one of the main organizer just happened to be like a Google engineer or something like that, or project manager, something. And he on the side was causing a revolution in the country. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? And the media covers for him. So it's like, I'm telling it to a lot of people for the first time, but Google is a hostile foreign intelligence apparatus. That's basically what they are. They're not friendly to American sovereignty. They're there to, at this point, ideologically program people through what they call machine learning fairness.
Can you tell everyone about machine learning fairness, since you just hit on one of the things I was going to ask you?
So 3 words, okay? Machine learning fairness. Machine learning fairness is Google's merging of critical race theory with artificial intelligence. And it's bad news because it seeks to rebias the entire internet. And they unleashed it upon, Google search. Like, this is the reason why Google search is so bad. It's because of this policy. People are like, oh, why is everything so biased? It's literally because of this thing that generates classifiers that are able to like rank everything according to a matrix of properties. Like, how right wing is it? What's its history? Does it contain hate speech? And, people started to realize on the outside that this was being turned up to 11 because they would upload a video. And even before a human, reviewer could possibly have time to look at this, all of a sudden it gets like demonetized. It says, oh, you said a naughty word. Right. People are like, what's going on? And it was machine learning fairness. Like, I had a dashboard. I was able to like get it. They left this entire thing unlocked on the inside of the company. So I could see like how they were doing it, how they're applying their censorship. And, on a technical level, it was really kind of awesome. I was impressed by what they were able to accomplish. But on the other hand, I was like really looking into the abyss of a new form of totalitarianism, a form of AI totalitarianism. And the fact that they lied so hard to get it in there was my clue on, that this was really like an existential threat to humanity. They went so far as to even push out a disinfo campaign. That Project Dragonfly?
No, I don't. I want you to tell me about it because I was going to ask
Project Dragonfly was Google's like censorship engine that they were going to use on the Chinese Google search. Yeah. And all the liberals were like, oh my God, this is so horrible. How can they censor the internet in China? Oh, right. And then, so as an engineer, I was like, well, I'm going to check out this Project Dragonfly. Couldn't see anything. Just absolutely zero information about it, which is rare for a project of any size. It's going to leave like some drop. There's going to be like a manager's working on it. There's going to be key results, what they're trying to achieve this quarter. There was like nothing for this Project Dragonfly, but I saw machine learning fairness. And as soon as I saw the words machine learning fairness, I was like, oh, those clever little totalitarians. Yeah. They're hiding the name of the end of civilization in an innocuous sounding word called machine learning fairness. In fact, if you were against machine learning fairness, they could just say, well, he's against equality and all this other, trigger words. And so as soon as I saw machine learning fairness, I was like, aha, this is it. This is it. I know it. I feel it in my gut. And I just started diving into all the different little things that had, I mean, it spread out kind of like an ant colony. Like there were like these little sub projects that it had. And they were all connected together through this web of, design documents.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I started, downloading all this stuff. The reason why I first started to download it is I didn't actually intend to blow the whistle. Like I didn't have this like grand plan.
Right.
I just really wanted to win this argument that I had with my roommate, who's this total brainwashed leftist. And I was just like, finally, I've got some things that he can no longer gaslight
look what
me
they're
and tell
doing.
me.
Yeah. He would have argued with you anyway, but
yeah. And he did. It wasn't like I ever won. It's funny, right? You think that like winning. You just need more logic or something, but no, I can tell you that he still thinks he's right after everything that's happened. But
it's true. So wait, are you telling me that what they did was they took a program which they had originally developed to implement in China because of the censorship China demands that is put on the internet, and then they repurposed it?
I'm saying is that they had machine learning fairness, and to cover it up, they put out a disinfo op called Project Dragonfly.
Oh, okay.
And so everyone's like, oh my God. And everyone's like virtue signaling over it and, pontificating about how much they believe in free speech and it's just like, it turns out it's just like, it's a fake project that Google put out there so that everyone would be busy looking at how they were supposedly going to like censor China. But in reality, they were preparing to roll it out at scale on all their products right here in the United States. And if I didn't step forward, no one would know what it was called or how it functioned at all. And, for me, it was like, well, here's 950 pages of design documents. Let's see how they try to weasel out of this one.
Dude, I love you for what you did. You have no idea how many times I shared your website, those documents. In the last year and a half, I can tell you, I've probably posted, commented with, emailed and texted your interview, your website, and those documents probably close to 150 times.
Wow.
And that's just because people don't understand. To this day, they don't. And look, it must be really hard for you sitting back and watching the fucking phony reception and this whistleblower from Facebook who's, they rolled out the red carpet for her, they put her, and I'm like, what? Do people understand what a dog and pony show this is? And what
give her an Emmy.
You know what I'm saying? Like this is such horse shit. You know what I mean? And I was like, I would love, I was thinking to myself, poor Zach, man, he's got to be watching all this and being like, this is not what they do to people who blow the corporate whistle. Okay. In case you're listening and you're wondering, well, what do they do? Well, what do they do? Like, there's a reason why Joe Rogan was just featured in an article, because in his interview with Gupta, he said, he told Jamie to stop searching shit with Google. Right. And Jamie's like, oh, well, he was like, well, stop using that fucking thing. And this made a headline today. I just saw it. It said like Rogan tells Jamie not to use Google. And I'm like, why is this news? This should not be news. It's still not out there because, it's totally suppressed. You weren't given a welcome, because guess what? The mainstream media is following suit with Google and the rest of them. Of course they are. And just to clarify one other thing that Zach said, the reason why Zach had access to these projects is because what Google used to have, and they probably still do for the most part. I would love to know what adjustments they made, if they made any, but they were kind of anti-corporate in a lot of ways, because everything was shared, right? And that's not a very corporate practice. You don't just share information with everyone. But Google had more of an academic approach to the way they set things up. And that's why they were such a beloved company. I've been to Burning Man. I'm pretty sure, Zach, you've been to Burning Man, Google 10 times. Damn. Google is what was really loved because they were kind of radically they were anti-corporate in a lot of ways, the way they did things. Right. And I mean, even the way they set up their workplace, everything about it was pretty awesome until it seems in 2016, they decided that the people could no longer be trusted to think for themselves, and they didn't see what happened in 2016 as a democratic process, apparently. I mean, from what I read in Zach's book, and Zach can speak to this much better than I can, it seemed like they felt like there had been a great wrong done to the world, and that they weren't doing their duty as a corporate superpower with control over the internet to help people think. I don't know, Zach, what I mean, they think that they're saving the world, right?
They thought that Russia hacked the election and that there was a disinfo campaign and a bunch of fake news from Russian intelligence with the Pizzagate story that blew out. And that because of that fake story, Trump got his nose over the finish line, and that therefore he won. I mean, parts of that are true, right? With their narratives, there's always some sort of kernel of trust. Trump did get his nose just over the finish line. And he did win by the system that we have. The whole thing about Russia hacking, though, was just such an obvious lie. I was like, they would turn the other way if it was France or the UK. They're just like, oh, they're just using their freedom of speech. And all of a sudden it's like the whole thing of oh, Russia had an influence operation or put some ad money in. And that's just so horrible and atrocious. I'm like, really? I just I'm reading that on The Guardian,
right, which
is a British magazine, complaining that Russia's got access to our media system. And it was just what is going on here?
Yeah.
And so it was 2016, everybody just lost their goddamn mind.
Yeah.
And Google's C-level executives were no different. And they all fell in. And I'm just it was is everyone taking crazy pills?
Superman died. It seemed like I was reading your book and I'm like, this reminds me of when I was reading the Funeral for a Friend series that was written by DC Comics. When Doomsday killed Superman, they had this 14-part series, and it was just this somber, very, very emotional comic book series. And I was like, this is kind of like what Zach's experiencing at Google after the election.
It's a great
Superman
analogy.
died. It was crazy. Yeah. Man. But before we go on, let me ask you something. I wanted to ask you this right away, and I knew we were going to get caught right up into it. But how are you, man? How is life for you these days? I mean, it must be crazy seeing what you've been seeing in the past year and a half with what's happening with Google and YouTube and the amount of censorship. That I'm sure it's no surprise to you. But how are you doing with everything?
I'm doing great. I've had this book launch, and what I'm really excited for is a solution to the fragmentation that big tech has done, on the content creators.
Yeah.
This is a really big problem. Everyone was on this YouTube system, this vertically integrated monolith that just had a one-stop shop, was everything that you wanted to have, and everyone was at the party.
Yeah.
And then on October 15th, they just basically took their ban hammer and they just smashed the entire conservative ecosystem up to people that were excluded and those that were on the inside. And a lot of people put their head down, avoided the ban as well, and they're still enjoying their YouTube platforms, but we know that it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
The reason why they're not censoring right now is because they want everyone on those pages. And then on those last few weeks, when it really counts, they're just going to be like, oh my God, we got to censor all these bad people. And then they'll just go through in a digital, ethnic cleansing, and they'll just get rid of everyone that is pro-American. They did this before, they'll do it again. And so really for me, I've been spending my time on how to fix this problem. And it turns out that there is a technological solution to fragmentation. And that solution is called aggregation. Aggregation cancels censorship. And in fact, it's so important because it's going to be the next thing that I release for humanity. I actually put it as the final chapter of my book in the afterword. about how exactly we defeat censorship. And I would like to read it for you if you will allow me.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. How do you defeat censorship? This is a question I get asked a lot, and I have a very easy answer. Aggregation cancels censorship. What exactly made YouTube great? Well, YouTube is two things. One, it's a video hosting platform, and two, it's a video recommendation engine. This works great when everyone can be in the same platform. But then the YouTube purge happened on October 15th, 2020, and many of the conservative content creators got banned. So where exactly did they go? Of the content creators that I tracked, 75% of them were still on YouTube, while Rumble had 13% and BitChute had 11%. Those were compiled as of March 2021. Those numbers have changed since then. The problem now is that conservative content is fragmented. Users now have to play the social media shuffle to get to each of the conservative video creators every day. This turns out to be hours of work for the highest news consumers. Most casual news consumers won't go to great lengths to find the content they previously liked, which is why censorship works so well. So why did YouTube censor content? Well, it's been my experience that conservative and anti-globalist dissent has high engagement. Whether measured in clicks, likes, comments, or whatever, conservative content trends naturally. YouTube tried to tweak the recommendation engine, but failed, so they just started banning everyone. This game of whack-a-mole caused the YouTube recommendation algorithm to then over-recommend anyone left standing. This is why YouTube had to do the purge. Their AI recommendation engine was causing too many people to see conservative content and creating a mass shift in consciousness. After the YouTube purge, what did we miss the most? The answer is that we miss the recommendation engine. The alt tech platforms can't fix this because they are limited to the content on their own systems. But why does aggregation have to be tied to hosting video content? It doesn't. For example, if someone is censored on YouTube, would that content creator stop producing videos? Of course not. They're intellectuals with a crippling social media addiction. Of course, they're going to continue to make videos. So a hypothetical aggregator can just switch from pulling videos from one person's YouTube account to, say, Rumble, and continue serving those videos. This is more than just talk, though. This is something that I'm working actively on right now. And soon I will launch. So in the end, I ended up right where I began, in San Francisco, working on a video platform so people like you can connect to people you like and see the videos you love. But this time, a wiser and less naive person sits at the helm. One without the ill-conceived notion that a large mega corporation has America's interest at heart. The question is, if we build our alternative platforms, how far will big tech go to try and stop us?
That is the question.
The last chapter of my book, GoogleLeaks.
Speaking of Zach's book, I just finished it. Then my favorite forward, I love RFK Jr., but my favorite forward was from Charlene Bollinger. She's a filmmaker. She's known for the truth about cancer, but her forward was just, she spoke really well. She said, while most people would have turned a blind eye and ignored the blatant suppression of the First Amendment by the Google technocrats, Zach Vorhies drew his line in the sand on the side of truth, righteousness, and freedom of speech. GoogleLeaks, the name of Zach's book, uncovers the underbelly of the Orwellian censorship policies that are an integral part of big tech's propaganda machine. And then she goes on to thank Zach and call him an American hero. And she says, read the book, it'll blow you away and you won't regret it. And I agree. It's a great book. It's very eye-opening, and you get a front row seat as to how Google went from this company that everybody really thought was, embodied the American spirit in the way that it respected its employees and allowed them to collaborate, and the projects that it was making, and it was changing the world, to the company that it is now, which is hell-bent on rewriting and reprogramming society to its particular cultural values. And those values don't allow for any other opinion. That's the biggest problem with what they're doing. And I had this conversation with my tattoo artist. We get into this. He there's one thing on the planet that he hates, and that's Donald Trump, right? And I don't hate Trump. I mean, I'm not a big fan, but I don't hate him. I used to not like him very much, but he wants me to hate him, and he he really wants me to hate him again. I don't dislike him nearly enough for him, right? But he was saying to me, I was telling him how I'm having you on the podcast, and he was saying, oh, well, Google has no obligation to be anything but corporate. I'm like, yeah, but that's just bullshit, because they lied. They lied to Congress. They lied to the people. They didn't tell anyone they were doing this.
When they went public, they wrote a contract with like America. It was like the first one was, don't be evil. And the second one was to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible. How can Google make something universally accessible if they're banning it?
No, that's the opposite of their mission statement, right?
Yeah.
And I said, I was like, that besides the fact that this was their mission statement, and yeah, of course, corporations have biases and all that, but they didn't tell anyone they were doing this. And then they lied about the extent they were doing it. I mean, I found footage, and maybe it was on Project Veritas, of Senator Cruz confronting the Google executive and reading the Janai quote. And, they just sit there like with a smirk, because when you're a multi-billion dollar conglomerate company in America, you can get away with fucking anything. I mean, and
Whatever
that's the cold truth. You can kill as many people as you want. You'll just have to pay more billions in fines, and the government is more than happy to take the money. I mean, just ask Pfizer. Just ask some of these pharmaceutical companies. They do it every year. It's.
Can you share the screen? Can you share the screen with me?
Sure.
I want to show you something. It'll blow your mind. Right on this topic. I want to add to it.
All right, let's do it. Let me figure out how to do this.
Because people seem to have like this memory, this forgetfulness, this amnesia, where they're like, oh, they never made any promises, right? It's this weird rewriting in history. But fortunately, now we have the internet. So, and the internet is forever. Mm-hmm. And so I can show you this video so that, if anyone ever says that to you, you can just shut them up with this video.
Let's do it. I think you should be able to.
Boom. There we go. Okay. There we go. Hopefully you're going to be able to get the audio from this.
Okay.
So let me be clear. Google is not politically biased. Indeed, we go to extraordinary lengths to build our products and enforce our policies in an analytically objective, apolitical way. Our platforms reflect the online world that exists. Our job, which we take very seriously, is to deliver to users the most relevant and authoritative information out there. And studies have shown that we do just that. Objective third-party studies, including most recently a comprehensive year-long assessment by The Economist of Google's results, have found no evidence of bias in either direction. Additionally, in May of this year, our data scientists analyzed daily click-through rates on search results to the official websites of members of Congress. The data showed no difference in these metrics, whether the member was a Republican or a Democrat. We also analyzed official YouTube channels for all senators who have them, and we consistently found a balance between Republicans and Democrats. Our platforms, such as Google Search or YouTube, deal with massive amounts of information. And to manage these volumes, we rely on algorithms and implement testing and evaluation.
I would love to hear these statistics now.
None of our systems are designed to filter out individuals or groups based on political viewpoints.
Liar!
Yeah, that's definitely not true. They can't say that anymore, can they? I mean, It would
Yeah.
be,
From time to time, for example, political ads may violate our advertising guidelines, and we've disallowed ads from both Democrats and Republicans. From time to time, our knowledge panels, which help you find quick facts when you search for information about topics like Hillary Clinton or the California Republican Party, may reflect erroneous information from the web and will need to be corrected.
Like when that's a reference. I don't know if you remember this, but Google's official, like, they had like this knowledge engine that was like pulling information from Wikipedia, and someone did a stealth edit so that they got the California Parties Association referred to as the Nazi Party. And so when you typed in California GOP, it literally returned Nazis.
wow.
And it like, so that's what he was referring to right there. Let's continue.
We work hard to learn from our mistakes and improve our products, but these mistakes have affected both parties and are not the product of bias. As technology continues
my
to play an
God.
increasingly essential
Jesus.
role in the lives of Americans, we know that users expect the highest degree of integrity from our products and that we must meet that expectation every day. If we don't, our users will go elsewhere. And that is why we invest so heavily in these systems and tools that help us surface the content that is most relevant to our users in an analytically objective, apolitical way.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
you know what? He is saying a very specific truth, which is that if they don't deliver what the customers want, the customers are going to go away. And I think that that's what's kind of happening. Like people are like, oh, Facebook is just like getting like it
Yeah.
sucks now. Right. And I think what's happening right now is that the oligarchs are freaking out because they don't want Facebook to go the way of MySpace.
Right.
And right now they're trying to use this whistleblower that's coming in, and she's ticking all the check marks, right?
Oh, yeah.
She's blowing the whistle that Facebook didn't censor enough.
Give me
And
a
she's
fucking break.
testifying to Congress that Facebook needs even more immunity. Oh, yes. She's actually saying she said to Congress, the company she's blowing the whistle on, that they need more immunity.
She actually fucking said that.
In exchange for this immunity, Facebook will disclose to a government oversight body the algorithms that rearrange everything. So yeah, it's basically the final step of fascism where the state and the corporations formally merge in order to have political censorship. And this is what this whole leftist cabal is trying to do right now while they still cling to power. And as people wake up and realize that we've got a foreign power sitting on the throne that's heavily compromised and blackmailed and a freaking pervert. Joe Biden is a pervert. I don't know if he's actually, mentally not there.
Yeah.
Like that's what they want us to believe.
I mean, who knows?
He's only 78, right?
78 going on 90, I think, but
whatever, right? Like there's all these photo ops and they're like, oh, he's just geriatric and he's got no idea. Whatever.
Dude, he's not right. He's not right, but
he's not right. But I think it's kind of an act, right? And so, we're basically in this thing where they're trying to stabilize the whole system. They got us on lockdown. They got this like fear-driven thing, and now they've got everyone in this like alternative reality. Literally, right? It's just like
it's crazy.
And and what's
funny,
and
even as the truth is rolled out, and it's not being rolled out on, I posted something on Facebook the other day. Like, I don't know, I posted it was a report from Taiwan, and the reporter was saying that the deaths in Taiwan from the jab have now officially outnumbered the deaths from the virus. And Instagram pulled my story, and they said, they asked me if I would like to dispute, and I said, yeah. I was like, can you review it? Because these are just statistics. And then an hour later it came back and said, we've reviewed your thing. And they allowed it to go back on. But I was laughing because it's like the algorithms pick something up and they just flag words and you know how they work. It's like, but it's literal news. It's indisputable. And what's crazy is you still have the government, and it really makes me wonder, how much information do they get? And why are they white knuckling this narrative when it's going to bite them in the ass? It's the longer they continue down this path and ignore the truth of what many of us have known for quite a while, the worse it looks for their administration, the worse it's going to look for the entire party. And more people are like, yeah, man, I mean, you got to admit natural immunity is better. It's statistically better in every way from almost every study, except for the one that did, or, you know what I mean? The one that they prop up, which their studies are literal nonsense. They are such bullshit posing as science. The more I learn about them, I'm just like, are you serious? That's what the FDA allowed them to submit? No wonder people are resigning and leaving. This is like the biggest clown show the world has ever seen.
Here's how I understand it, is that this conspiracy has been operating in the shadows. It's a mix of different families, the descendants of the Roman empires. And, they're all in it together. And, their lineage comes from slave owners, right? Like all these empires were built, the Ottoman, the Roman Empire, it was all slaves. And those who could outslave the other, had a better, farther reaching, more successful empire. And so these people that are at the top are sociopaths, and they come from a bloodline of sociopaths. And the truth versus the media was just so different, and they had such an airtight monopoly on it that, think about 1980. Like, if you said like the Illuminati, people were like, whatever, right? Even though they knew something was wrong, it wasn't like, oh, well, not everyone could be in on it. And now we have the social media, we have the internet. Now you can go to someone that is an influencer and you can contradict him in his own tweet and say, you're wrong, here's the evidence.
Right.
And that actually ends up to, create a new type of hive mind, believe it or not, because if you're interacting with each other, then it's almost kind of like it becomes a network of people, and you start to get the ability for certain narratives to, be a rise to the top. And what's really funny is I almost see a rise of a hybrid AI human intelligence, a cybernetic collective. And that cybernetic collective has pretty much come alive on Reddit, on Twitter, everywhere that it touches. It's a loosely organized, decentralized news aggregation system that is a challenging established power. And the first thing this AI, this like Twitter, this cybernetic group, like the first thing when it came to life, it pretty much told us and said, they're lying about everything. And we're all like, really? Right. Yeah. And it turns out that once whoever tells the stories rules the world. That's what Plato said.
Yep.
And it turns out that if the oligarchs can't push their version of history, if they can't push their version on events, they can't push their version on current events as they're happening, known as news, then it turns out that they start to lose a lot of power and they start to freak out, which is why they did all the things that we see that they're doing now, is because they're so desperate to regain the narrative that at this point, they're cutting people's tongues out and they're banishing them to digital ghettos in order to try to push, these hordes of dissenters to the outer regions and, exclude them from society. You can't be a cop if you think that this dangerous can possibly harm you, right? This is what they're doing. They're trying to exclude everyone. And what this just smells to me is desperation. And no one on either side of the political spectrum appreciates what's going on right now. They think that the elites have lost their minds. Yeah. The mandates are a crime against everything that the left has stood up for.
Yep.
Like, remember the last 3 decades.
That's right.
My body, my choice. My body, my
Right.
choice. I don't care if it's killing a person. It's my body, my
Right.
choice.
Now,
All of a sudden, it's like, you
same
will
people.
submit to an all-powerful sovereign.
And they're like,
that's
that's not the
going to
same thing.
check you
Nice.
down.
They're like, nice try. That's not the same thing. I'm like, what the fuck are you
Fuck, right?
talking about?
Frauds,
Of course it's the same
intellectual
thing.
frauds.
You know, like, but this is, I was saying this to one of my guests a few podcasts ago. I was like, look, it's a testament to how powerful fear propaganda is, that you can convince someone, that you could literally take someone who has, been for one thing their whole life and shake them around so much with fear that they will happily and readily, seamlessly transition into this other way of thinking without ever having the self-awareness to reflect and say, wait a minute, maybe that's a little hypocritical of me, considering my previous beliefs, but that's the power of fear, right? And that's why, the propaganda machine, it is something to behold. But the good news is the truth usually comes out. And in the age of the internet and the ways we have to communicate, they really they can bury the truth for so long. The people who are glued to the matrix and still plugged in, they're going to be the last bastion that they have a hold of. But for the most part, even some of those people are scratching their heads like, what the fuck is going on? People are dying left and right. I thought that this was supposed to keep us from that. Well, some of us have been telling you that it ain't going to keep you from that for about, 9-10 months now, since they started doing it. Because if you looked at the trial, if you really knew how to read the trial, Pfizer's trial, all these trials, you would have seen that there was no way they could tell you that within 30 days, 60 days. And the way that they were able to say that it was as, quote, effective as it was a joke. And people just don't believe, people have this they're naive. And I
because I'm having all these trials where all the animals would die. And it's like, it was the running internet joke of like June and July of 2020 that, wow, look how bad they're failing. They try to use this new vaccine and all the animals died. Ha ha ha. And then somehow it gets approved to humans.
Well, they skipped it. They skipped the trials. And these people, they're so far gone, Zach, that like I had one guy who was like, oh, they didn't skip the animal trials. They're having them right now. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? The animal trials come before the humans are supposed to be subjected. This is the, like, a tried and true and safe way that they test medicine. It's you can't say that. And he's like, I told you were wrong. They're having the animal trials right now. I'm like, I'm not trying to win an argument. You fucking jerk. I'm like, the point is, this is dangerous. And they skip the animal trials because they're supposed to come before the humans get the drug. Do you understand that it's not about winning the argument? I don't give a fuck that they're doing them now. I just care that they're subjecting humans to things they didn't subject animals to. And this, but people are so caught up in this intellectual, mental, masturbatory fucking, late night session that they're just stuck to repeat on. And it's a violent one too. They're not. I'm like, dude, all I care about is if people are going to get hurt. And the way I see it, people are going to get hurt. And sure enough, people are getting hurt. Like my father has had a full body rash for 8 fucking months. All right. You thought he was miserable before. You got to meet him now. Okay. Like he can't sleep. It's uncomfortable. He's fucking miserable. And
my dad had that same thing.
It
how he
flared.
geared himself up?
Huh.
He got rid of all carbs and it just went away. And as soon as he ate carbs, it came back. And then eventually his body got rid of it. And he's no longer in the inflammation zone.
Yeah, I gotta sleep because it flared up when he got the first jab, to the point where they weren't going to even give him the second jab, but he insisted because he was convinced into it. He has doctor friends. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Wow. He got a reaction, and then he took the booster shot. Did he give him an even more reaction?
I mean, it just continued the same one. It got worse.
Oh my God. It's like, it's so funny. Like when I was like trying to be raised as like this good little Catholic, I was like, they're like, oh, that person could be saved. And I was just like, what does that even mean? Right. Like saved. Like,
yeah.
And now it's like, now it's like I'm across the Rubicon, and I literally see people that have fallen from grace. They watch TV, they've gotten fat, they're eating junk food, they're drinking alcohol, and their heads filled with poison. The food is filled with poison. And it's like, I want to save them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this language of saving people, if you can just show them the truth, makes a lot of sense. Like, it's like, I don't even see the left as my enemy. I see them as people that can be saved from the torment of the mind virus and the mind control that is being pushed on them to weaken and destroy them. Like, if people realize that the system is weaponized against them, and if they can just realize that they're lying about everything, then the most, they'll change their diet. They'll like, I did a diet, like I basically got rid of most of the carbs and all the breads. And I basically replaced it with a lot of coconut oil to replace all the carbs because it's a fat. And so like, obviously it's against all the medical recommendations because like, oh, saturated fat's going to clog your arteries. And it's a complete lie. Like if you make a lot of your calories from coconut oil or flaxseed oil, then you're going, like, the burning of fat with ketones is a completely different process than burning it through the normal process. Right. And the thing is that all the little parasites inside of your body, the tapeworms and, the what are they called? I can't remember. Flukes, right? There's flukes. There's mucus worms in people's intestines. It was like, I thought that it was rare. And then I read this like Russian study where it was like, they found it in almost every single subject. Wow. I'm just like, wow. And so all of that stuff all eats sugar, they love it. They ferment it. It's an easy thing to digest. So they're eating the sugar. If you eat coconut oil, you basically give these parasites something they can't eat, but the rest of your body can just eat it fine when when it switches over to fat adaptation, especially if you're eating in your diet. And so it's just like, if people knew this, then they would radically change their diet. They would look like a beach cover of LA in the 1970s. Like, you ever look at that with all the hot bodies that are there? It's like, what happened? And I'll tell you what happened. It was the FDA, it was the central authorities. They're weaponizing the food against us. And, and it's just like all these people, it's just like, I see them getting sicker, and it's just like, you shouldn't be drinking all of that. You shouldn't be eating all of that. No, alcohol is not good to drink 2 glasses a night. That's just the narrative that they tell you to get hooked on alcohol. It's like, oh, I didn't have 2 glasses yesterday, and I'm having 2 today. But I guess it's like if I skip one day, then it's like 4 today, right? You start getting that process because I like to have a drink or 2, right? Like, I know how it is, and that whole 2 drinks is like the gateway to get people on the alcohol, and then they just destroy their gut, they destroy their liver, they get
immune
fat,
system, everything.
Everything, right? And so
there's a consumer right there for the medical military industrial complex. People don't understand. I say this all the time, and I don't know if people can hear it enough. The words food and drug should not be in the same sentence in the same regulatory body. Okay. That is insane.
It's insane.
It's fucking insane. And it's one of the reasons why we have one of the unhealthiest populations for a quote wealthy country in the world. Okay. The fact that I just heard this again today and it blew my mind. Like, people who died of had an average of 4 comorbidities. People who ended up in the ICU had a 78% obesity rate. Just those 2 statistics alone, just those 2, that the people who died of COVID had if you died, you had to have on average 4 comorbidities. That was the majority. And 80%, round up 2%, you had to be obese to end up in the emergency room. So the people who are getting sick are patently unhealthy. They have many things killing them. This is for the most part. There's obviously exceptions to every rule. I'm not saying everyone who is dying, go ahead, show me.
I mean, can you blame them for getting so sick? Like, this is our food pyramid, right? They say, oh, what you need the most is glutenated wheat, stuff that, like wheat, the grass seeds, they don't want to be eaten. They're filled with anti-nutrients. Even if you don't have a gluten sensitivity, you're going to get inflamed subclinically from all of this bread in your gut, whether you've got a susceptibility to it or not. It's just inflammatory for everyone. Gluten exists in the bran in order to explode the insect stomachs as they try to eat the kernel.
Right. And that's not even getting into glyphosate, right? I mean, like the fact that, there is no wheat in America that is not sprayed with Roundup, with glyphosate. Do you understand that so they're doing this after the fact? The wheat is harvested, and then not only is it grown with these, but after the fact, because it adds buoyancy, it adds weight, and it makes the wheat more durable. They spray it directly on. Okay, that is a toxic, carcinogenic chemical that causes an array of cancers. And every fucking piece of bread that you are eating, everything that comes from wheat in our country that is not grown organically and or without these pesticides is covered in it. If you think the FDA is looking out for you, you are fucking deranged.
They're covering up. The other guys are like Monsanto people. It's like the corruption is just intolerable. It's right. Totally. And you get systemic. You get this pyramid right now. It's completely inverted, right? Like the breads, you should have 0 of these, or it should be at the top of the pyramid where you don't eat anything at all about that. And it turns out that the oils and the fats, you can eat pretty much unlimited amounts of these. Whatever bread, carbohydrate calorie you subtract, you should replace it with like a coconut oil or flaxseed oil. Not the corn oils because they're inflammatory, but the coconut oil is the most stable, highest quality, healthy oil you can put in your food. That should be at right there above vegetables, right? Like the vegetable servings should not be 6 to 8. It should, or 6 to 11. I mean, that shouldn't be bread. That should be vegetables.
Right.
Like most of your diet should just be vegetables with some fruit, the meat, the poultry, whatever. That's great. And lots of oil. And if you do that, you're going to live really well. You're going to have energy throughout the day. And a lot of your ailments are actually going to go away because your inflammation is just going to drop.
And that's the biggest cause. Yeah.
And this is the problem, is that the people today are on this. It's like, how can I even get upset with them? Because, what's their mind in comparison to this propaganda engine that's now micro-targeting them? Like it can actually give you customized propaganda based upon location and all the different attributes about who you are. And this is what I'm really scared about for humanity, because, they could create they could deep fake conspiracy theories.
Totally, man.
Tailored to each and every one of us, putting us into a highly suggestible worldview that is fundamentally false. And here's even the more insidious thing. Not only could it be false, but it could be unique to us and therefore fundamentally incompatible with all of our close friends or family, because they're being psyoped into a completely different reality by their phone and their AR system that they're wearing. Like, this is the future that we need to prevent. We don't want a ruthless, despotic AI governance system that's coming through, and its primary method is to disable us so that we can't live a happy life. Like if that were to happen, it's like, think about the worst dystopian. I mean, I might as well be, like the Matrix inside of a body container that's literally sucking all my energy out. At least, they're in a dream world. Yeah, I'm in a permanent.
I know they get at least they get the fantasy. You know what I'm saying? Right? We don't even get the benefit of that. But listen, Zach, I talk about this. I've had some amazing physicists on, and one guy his name's Bill Softkey, and he's been working, in and around tech for, his parents were nuclear physicists, and but he's on the forefront of this and working with a bunch of companies and creating anti-technological programs with them. And we're involved in a bunch of stuff that is, designed to counter the programming that is happening, and with the, them taking advantage of the addiction patterns that they know we have. And I mean, it's, you can't escape it today. And I have kids, and I can just tell you that I'm scared for them, and I'm trying to prepare them, and teach them self-governance, and teach them what happens, what these phones are designed to do, and why they want them so bad, and why they get so upset if they, when it's time to hand them over, and I make them aware every time. But they're powerful, and that they're really well written, and they're if you don't watch yourself, you catch yourself and you're like, why am I still scrolling? You know what I mean? Like, man, they're good. But I want to get to a bunch of questions. So I want to move on. Speaking of monitoring in real time, like this whole thing that Google rolled out with the Vegas shooter really blew me away. And the fact that they were kind of real time monitoring news stories, and if you haven't heard about Google's blacklists, well, you really got to read Zach's book to get the full, I can't give you the full details, but they have all these different blacklists, right? And one of the ways they were using them is they were censoring the Vegas shooter stories that were coming out. And it seems to me that they were, go for it, Zach, that they didn't want people to question the narrative that this was one shooter, one guy, Paddock, his name was, who was in a building apparently with enough guns and ammunition to, take out a small army, and that he had done this on his own, because they censored a lot of stories that brought into question this notion of one shooter. You can see from the screen, they were really on top of it. They didn't want anyone looking through the internet or YouTube and finding out that Stephen Paddock was anyone but the person the narrative was giving you that he was. And I found this very suspicious, Zach, because we've been talking about false flags, whether we've said those words or not. You mentioned something in your book that really struck out at me. And so by the time I read, as soon as I read your chapter, and I just read the heading, I didn't even get into the nuts and bolts of it yet. As soon as I read the heading, I got hit with this gut feeling, right? That the Vegas shooter was a totally government, created false flag event to try to move the yardstick a little further to their goal to take away the guns, because that's on the agenda, right? And then I read at the end of your book that a lot of people said, hey, they noticed when they were reading the pages that you handed over to the DOJ, that a lot of the stuff was false flags. And I was like, holy shit. I read a bunch of your theories, and I just kept thinking, son of a bitch, it wouldn't surprise me for a second if they had done this just to try to push the yardstick and take the guns away, keep moving the yardstick down. You know what I mean? Because nothing they say ever makes sense, and it's just so hard to imagine this guy who really had no history of violence. And then you find out that he was, possibly working with some of the government acronyms and moving, it's just crazy, man.
His girlfriend Mary was like a total spook.
Yeah. All these things, man. And like, just the way that they pick, like everything about mass shooting, there's just like, why? It just begs the question, like, what is Google protecting? All the,
like, why are they interested in blacklisting Mike Kronk?
Crisis actor
reunites with his buddy. Like, it's like oddly specific.
It is.
Like, why is this? Who is this Mike Kronk guy?
Right?
Why are they blocking this narrative that he's reuniting with his buddy?
They don't want you to see some real shit. That's why.
Proof of crisis actors, psyop crisis actors.
Sandy Hook Crisis Actors compilation. I mean, this is what they destroyed. Alex Jones.
Right here, cure cancer and cancer cure. Yeah, they destroyed Alex Jones for suggesting this.
That they did. And in case you were wondering, Google does not think anyone should be searching for a cure for cancer or a cancer cure. That was part of the good deeds they're doing for humanity was also keeping people from looking for cancer cures. That's how good their intentions are. I mean, it makes perfect sense. If you're Google and you're trying to save the world, you don't want anyone to be looking for dangerous cancer cures. Right. I mean, this is just fucking so. And the fact that more people don't know about this act, the fact that Joe Rogan says some shit on his podcast just a couple of days ago about Google, and people are like, what did he say about Google? What's wrong with Google? I'm like, oh my God. Like, how is this not? And that's because, people who do what you do aren't given a seat in front of Congress immediately. I mean,
right. They give it to that.
What's her name? Fucking, what a joke.
Frances Hagen.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Hagen, Facebook's little plant. You got to GOP. So, and do you remember, I think it was 2020. It was 2019 when people were like, oh, you can search these words adrenochrome and all that shit like that. And they're like, people, a lot of the conspiracy theorists were saying, the hierarchy's falling and look, you can search these words now. And I'm assuming that Google's algorithms were just kind of shuffling things and rearranging things. But of course it wasn't ever what they said it was, and the whole Q psyop thing and people believing all that stuff. It's just amazing.
Like, it's like we had this like one guy, Joe M, who was like Joe Messapos, and like some Italian or Spanish guy told me that meant, like mother's vagina or something. It was like some really, really crude word that was used. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And what was weird is that this was one of the most far-reaching, QAnon pushers on the platform. And 60 Minutes even did an episode showcasing this as an example of, YouTube not taking action on fringe accounts. And I was just like, why wouldn't YouTube take this account off?
Right.
Like, they have no qualms whatsoever about taking anything off, even if it's slightly controversial. Like, this is the level of interaction and tailorship that we need to take seriously. And right now, we're not quite at that stage. So it's not something we have to tackle right this second, but it's coming, man.
Yeah, it's not far. It's not as far away as people. It's amazing to me that the company that ended up selling this kind of AI to Google had them sign a pact or a clause that said that they would never ever use this AI in a weaponized fashion or with any
Boston Dynamics.
That's right, Boston Dynamics. And Google, I mean, they didn't necessarily outbid, because Zuckerberg tried to throw money at these people. Like he was very competitive, but they went with Google because Google had such a benign history. Google had espoused all the values that they had espoused coming from academia. And so, even though Zuckerberg was like, I ain't signing no ethics clause, but I'll give you all this money. They were like, no, man, no, we don't trust you. They went with Google. And now Google has taken, I mean, it's like, wow, it's such a storybook. Google
sold them off because they couldn't get along with the CEO for some reason.
That's right. That's right. And I bet you those people are wondering what they have created, but the technology.
I mean, it's all going to be like all the tech. I mean, and this is the thing, like just their lessons of what works and what doesn't. The engineers are going to go and they're going to spread. They're going to like, this is how I did it. Here's a PowerPoint presentation. Right. They're going to like do all that stuff. And then doing all of that a second time via copy is almost free. Right. So Boston Dynamics is really paving the way. They're going to get first mover advantage. But even if they are like, look, we're not going to make it evil, all the copycats have no such moral
Right.
qualms that they
Look
need
at
to sign up
Facebook,
to.
Yeah. Of course.
So,
You're seeing
you
it, but the good guys can do the same and use the same, and then we got to have faith that the human spirit will win out, because the fact of the matter is, most people some of them on a very conscious level, others on a more subconscious level, want to be free, right? It's just this freedom versus safety thing, and when you take away the safety thing, people are much more likely to say, I will operate within these confines if it's going to make me safe. So that's why they need the fear. That's why they need the propaganda. But I trust.
well, you know, it's funny. It's funny. It's like now they're like warning us that there's going to be this AI that's going to watch every single thing that you do and judge you.
Yeah.
And I was like, how is that worse than being a Catholic?
Yeah, I know, right? Obviously, they didn't grow up Catholic. My
Right.
God.
It's this weird throwback where I thought that there was like this all powerful being that was watching over me all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and
Me too, Zach.
yeah. Isn't that weird how it's
Some of
like,
us thought we were going to hell by the time we were 12. Okay. Try dealing with that when you're 12 years old. People are like,
well,
what are
my
you
dad's
praying
not a
for?
Catholic. So I thought my dad, I mean, I'm consecrated. So it's like, I'm a Catholic,
Yeah.
but my dad wasn't. He was like, no, I'm not going to have that. So like at 12, I was like, wait a minute, my dad's going to hell.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And it's just like, it's a crazy
Oh my
like
God,
thing
what a
to think
mind fuck.
about, that the person that you love the most,
Yeah.
you know, the male that you love the most as a role model is going to burn in fire for eternity.
It's
Like
a tough one to swallow.
what kind of rules is that fair God setting up? Not exactly like what I think is the way
Oh my God, dude.
the
I'm
situation
so
is.
glad that my kids, the only thing they know about hell is that in the one Thor movie, that's the name of Thor's sister.
Mhm.
I'm so happy about that. I can't tell
Yeah,
you.
it's a mind.
Such
You
a
know, the
mind
funny
fuck.
thing is that like all this stuff about like how to create a strong society, it turns out that those are also all the religious rules, like something about holding people to a projected consensus of what they can and cannot do, is the difference between whether you've got a strong society that can weather all kinds of things and become even stronger, or whether you've got one that just commits seppuku, suicide, and collapses. And you know, it's like people need to be. Well, the only thing I can possibly hope for in the worst case scenario where the AI comes out is that if it watches everyone that they do, and then people decide, well, you know, if I do this bad thing, then I'll have immediately negative consequences. And so everyone like ends up being nice to each other. Like that's the only thing. Like, wouldn't that be funny? Like if you said like a bad comment, you get like an immediate ding to your social credit score. Like, could you imagine how many smiles you would see? It'd be a really creepy thing because everyone would be, forced to smile. But at the same time, if you're a naive person, you're like, oh, wow, everyone's just so friendly. Why is that?
Yeah.
You know,
I feel I'd be scared because I feel like I was surrounded by psychopaths. And in a lot of ways, you'd be creating a lot of psychopaths because you'd have people, not allowing how they really feel to come out and just putting on this. I mean, it's like the movie Falling Down with, who was that? Kurt Russell, or was it Kurt?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and basically the movie's about a guy who goes fucking crazy because he's got so much pent up rage and he finally lets it all out. And you think he ends up with a baseball bat, but it's just
the drones would tranquilize him in 2040 before.
That's right. That's right. And he could get, according to the Johnson & Johnson whistleblower, we can vaccinate people like that too. Just use blow darts from drones. Good idea.
Right.
That's
so scary. It's so scary.
What's crazy is he kept repeating it. He kept saying it. So he kept responding to the same question and being like blow darts. And you could tell he was half in jest, but he was half serious too.
You know, what's funny is that I would hang out with those kinds of people in high school because I was like a super nerd that was like, that like only liked to hang out with smart people. And some of the people like were kind of degenerate and like fringy. Yeah. And back then I thought it was like cool and edgy and all this, but they were the ones that said like really messed up stuff. And it's really like kind of interesting to me because I've started to see, this, like I've started to notice a pattern of the totalitarians are also the most degenerate. And
Yeah.
it was this observation. I was like, wait, is this going on? No, that's I can't think that's like, but then I was like, but wait, there's this pattern here. And I'm just like, and then at Google, there was like this consortium of trans people, mostly male to female. And they were basically self-appointed Praetorian guards of what was acceptable discourse on Google. And they would organize and lobby the TGIF, the weekly meeting that we had. And they would come up and they would be like, why is Google giving a platform for Nazis? And I was like, okay, well, this is going to blow over. But it was like every week.
Right.
And it kept on getting louder. And the company was acting like they were responding to this very vocal minority. And the email threads would be filled with these activists that were trained in these gender studies classes or had just picked it up as a hobby. And they used all these buzzwords. And it was like, wait, why are these people seizing control of the political narrative that's inside, right? It was this small group. And it was like, no matter what the conversation was, it was like some people were full-time leftist trolls that would come and try to re-steer the conversation and reframe it in their Marxist ideological lens. And it was like, if you want to look at what was happening with the company, it was basically that these activists, these neurotic activists that were also degenerate, seemed to have the ability to change the entire mission of the company to being this one that was highly discriminatory and, something that was a violator of human rights. And they basically created this digital apartheid. And, and I see that this is now happening in other companies. And I just have to ask myself a question, Faust, which is, was this actually the plan all along? Like, I supported gay rights and I supported the trans community in the very beginning. I even had this idea, wrong idea, but this idea to actually get this tattoo, this tree of life, and the tree was going to be some sort of trans thing. And I don't know why I had it in my head, but now I'm looking back, I'm like, wait a minute, was I just responding to the predictive programming? I don't have any tattoos. It was just something that I had a thing over. Yeah. And then after this whole trans thing came out, and I went, wait a minute, did I think that because of some predictive programming? Yeah. And I think that the programming is there so that we get these people in positions of power. They have this Marxist ideological support that's underneath them. And then they can just be like, look, we need to ban 50% of the population because how dare the plebeians get together and talk about issues that are affecting their very livelihood. Right. No, yeah, you can't. And it's just the worst Nazis got in positions of power at Google. And they were these Nazis were actually, projecting all of their bad stuff onto everyone else. It was no, you guys are the ones that want to censor. And you're the ones that want to repress. And you're doing it not because of science. You guys are actually following this crazy religious ideology. Literally. And it was completely out of control. And what I see is a company that's being hollowed out, one that's being subverted and infiltrated and converted into a front group of this. You can call them the globalists, you can call them the Illuminati, you can call them the insiders or the network of global corporate control. We're all referring to these oligarchs, these apex oligarchs that are trying to seize control of the entire country. And they're doing it from the high, lofty rooftops of their central banking facilities. Dude, when I read that you would go around and that you would go to the Occupy Wall Street, protests but you would bring your projector and you would educate people about the formation of the federal banking criminal cartel, the Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. I was like, me and Zach are going to get along real good because people, I mean, it's you can't teach people about the corruption of this country without them understanding the Federal Reserve. It's really it's one of the cornerstones, at least for this part of history, this American contribution to
this global elite corruption, right? You have to know about the Federal Reserve. And so the fact that you were doing that is like, dude, I used to host screeners and show documentaries and just try to raise awareness of these things. But you can't talk about corruption in this country without talking about the Federal Reserve. And people don't realize that. Most people are in general, people don't, when this whole thing started, Zach, I mean, with all I did was look for ways. I'm like, this is orchestrated by the same families that have been orchestrating events, since really 1912, but certainly after the First World War ended, the major events that have happened in this country have been orchestrated by these families, and they're the same families that own everything, right? So I'm like, how are they going to take this? And then I'm realizing that, oh man, this checks every single box that they have, every agenda, from population control to surveillance to switching everything over to a one world, very well monitored system. I mean, think about all the boxes, this whole mess that we've been in for a year and a half. It just checks every single one. The fear alone is going to keep people from meeting and having, babies. Okay. So it's all measured out. And I'm like, oh man, so this, and there was no, all the money was being sucked. It's still being sucked into their hands through the testing, through, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I see this before? It took me a while to put it all together, but I'm like, this plan must have been years in the making, and they finally got a chance to pull the trigger, and they did. And boy, it's paying off for them. Look at the wealth alone, the wealth transfer alone. This is the largest wealth transfer in the history of mankind.
Yes.
There's nothing that compares to it. Even Zuckerberg, I mean, these guys have, and these guys are the ones who are in the spotlight, the ones that are making in the real big money. You'll never hear about them. You'll never hear about those families, the ones who own the patents on the testing and everything else that is the Rona. These guys are, I mean, you're talking trillions. You're talking Zuck and these guys, they kiss their ring when they meet these people, and they never get to meet them in public, and they know better than to speak their name. That's how powerful these other families are. But
I want to show you something to add to this.
Go for it.
You got to see this. You got to check it out because it'll blow your mind.
Oh yeah, I love this guy.
And it's much worse to be irrelevant than to be exploited. Those who fail in the struggle against irrelevance would constitute a new useless class. People who are useless, not from the viewpoint of their friends and family, of course, but useless from the viewpoint of the economic and political system. And this useless class will be separated by an ever-growing gap from the ever more powerful elite, a system that understands us better than we understand ourselves, can predict our feelings and decisions, can manipulate our feelings and decisions, and can ultimately make decisions for us. And if you ask why you were not given a loan, or why the bank didn't raise the interest rate, the answer will always be the same. Because the computer says no. And since the limited human brain lacks sufficient biological knowledge, computing power, and data, humans will simply not be able to understand the computer's decisions.
Well, we know that people start to cooperate when they face a common enemy. And, my question to both of you from slightly different points of view, how do we get a real or perceived common enemy out of those real challenges that face us? When you think about the future, those who control 5G or make 5G will actually control all the infrastructure on which the technology that we're talking about is going to be.
So, yeah.
Oh man, I love that guy. I've heard him speak. he makes great points, and he's doing it in the den of wolves, right? Like he's the only one who's speaking any. I mean, I just wonder what they think of him at the World Economic Forum when he goes up and gives a presentation, because he's the one who's running counter.
He's telling it as what they really think about us, right? Like we're subjects to their system.
And he's warning them, but it's like you're warning the sharks that there's going to be blood in the water, It's like,
well, I think he's going along with it. I think he just looks at it, it's like, oh yeah, there's all these people that are going to be administered like chattel. And what's scary is that they put into stone the directive as the first rule of the Georgia Guidestones to bring the population to 500 million in perpetual balance with nature.
Yeah, I know.
So
it's just
with everything that you see happening here with the pandemic, does it seem like that goal's getting closer to being achieved or further?
Yeah. I mean, over and over, I see it. I'm like, man, you can't take away their strategic fucking plan, because it's just on every level. They're but people are becoming more aware of them. So, let me ask you this. I don't know. I guess because Google did such an about face, what do you call it? When you present as one thing and then you turn around and all of a sudden you realize that it's another, right? And that's because they had a change of guard. It was in reaction to an election, that they decided democracy could no longer be trusted. And, I'm sure that when they looked at the analytics of their notion that somehow that election was stolen in 2016 because of a few news stories, that first of all, they couldn't prove to be true or untrue anyway. There was, we're finding out now that what was factually bullshit was the Russian collusion. And of course, most people don't know about that. The press isn't reporting on the fact that they were reporting lies made up by the Clinton campaign, in real time for 3 years, diverting resources, attention, putting him on. I mean, like, people will probably never hear about that, and when they do, Zach, they won't admit it, and that's because the news is no longer the news. It's entertainment. If you're watching it for anything other than laughs, you're crazy. I mean, but I want to move on to something a little more. I mean, not that that's not specific to what we're talking about, because of course it does, but do you think, and I think this is clear in what we've been seeing, but how do you think Google regards you? Have they been in contact at all in any way? And how do you think you personally have affected their methodologies, or have you at all?
Dude, I've wrecked the company. And that was one of the goals. And what I mean by wrecked the company is that the best way to wreck the engineer's productivity is to have a paranoid managerial class. And what I did is I knew that there was one shot that we were going to be able to take against Google with this disclosure, because once Google realized there was a contradiction between its open culture and the evil stuff that they were doing, that they would opt to lock down every single design document out there so as to prevent a repeat of what happened with me. And I wanted to make sure that that's what was going to happen. And so what I did is, I released all 950 pages, and I disseminated them via my website, zachvorhies.com. With analysis and breaking up all the PDFs, and this is what they mean, and clumping them together and basically creating stories. Because what I want to do is I don't want to just get the truth out about how Google really was censoring the American public and the rest of the world with machine learning fairness. I also wanted to terrorize the management by saying, you guys are evil, and if you're going to do it out in the open, prepare to have all your documents leaked.
Right.
What did they do? What they did is they locked down everything.
I bet they did.
Every engineer's life a living.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so
they went full corporate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like Apple actually has this policy of like locking down everything. You're not supposed to ask what your neighbor's working on. It's just no at Apple, because they want to prevent leaks. And now
Right.
Google's going to have to eat the productivity penalty of, total opaqueness from team to team. And now all of the engineers that they would have that would be, American engineers are basically going to feel the pressure because they're going to be like, hey, what's this that I'm working on? And Google's going to be like, oh, hush, hush, you can't say anything about it. Here's some NDAs. You have to be sworn to secrecy. Like when someone is not able to do something in the open, you're like, hey, what's going on here? Like, and this is part of their magic spell, is that if they can walk around in the open, and say, oh, we're not, this isn't wrong. Look, we're even saying it out in the open so you guys could all plainly see. Like that's what they started to do with this machine learning fairness, is that they just casually mentioned it during a TGIF internal. And then they started messaging it a little bit in public. And then it was like I just let it all out, all 950 pages, that this is what's censoring you guys. And so now they're like, oh, we got to like clamp down and hide our evil so that someone won't, blow the whistle on us again. And that's had a devastating effect on the company. I know this. There's employees, like I'm totally famous within Google. Everyone has heard about me pretty much. Yeah. It really hurts their morale. Like no one wants to work for the evil empire. No. And because of that, my hope is that this front group of the New World Order will lose the ability to recruit anyone of significant integrity, and they're just going to go the way of MySpace because all their stuff's too complicated. I mean, we could wake up one day and like some ricochet problem because of bad engineering, like hits one thing and then just takes the whole monster of google.com off the internet. And, like Facebook, right?
Like Facebook was gone the other day and I was like, hallelujah. It was hilarious. I was like, the world was a better place for a few hours anyway. Craziness. Oh man. But so how much this is a crazy question because I see this and I'm like, oh my God, people have no idea the amount of big tech coordination that allowed for the 2020 election. Like I was going to ask you, but I have the answer to the question already, like how, if Google tried to manipulate the 2016 election, but you pretty much answered that question in your first story of your TGIF meeting on the week after the election, right? I mean, I don't think that they decided that they were never going to allow something like that to happen again without stepping in. And that's clear, but how much effect do you think Google had on the 2020 election? I mean, and then let's start with just Google or if you want to include Facebook in that, because I think they also had a big effect.
Huge. I mean, their whole Google search engine has just been so politically corrupted at this point that it's a parody of itself. Yeah. And what they've done is they've allowed their news and search engine to be hijacked, and YouTube too, to be hijacked by these trending topics that get redirected to people that have a high EAT score. So that EAT score stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And CNN, Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, these companies have the supreme EAT score. So all they need to do to divert traffic to these, quote, mainstream media establishment outlets, prostitutes really, is the only thing they have to do at this point is figure out what keywords are trending for the last 24 hours, make a garbage article including those keywords, and then guess what? They win the internet that day for those keywords. And I saw this happening when I was trying to find Obama kids in cages because there was this, I wanted to fact check it, right? And so I fact checked it, and lo and behold, the mainstream media had written all these articles, pages and pages of articles where they were talking about Trump's kids in cages, but they put Obama in there somewhere. So it triggered on the keyword search that I was doing with Google. And it just basically gave me page after page of mainstream media articles, redirecting my inquiry back to Trump and the kids in cages. So, you know, you can't even get the other side at this point. And it's like, what's the effect of this on the electorate? Well, we're going to be like, there's going to be about 1/3 of the people that just buy into it no matter what. And I don't know why it's about 1/3, but it seems to be 1/3 of the people buy into it. 1/3 of the people don't buy into it. And 1/3 of the people are like, I don't know, let's go surfing.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the breakdown.
Yeah. So it's a huge, it's a powerful thing. I mean, they tried to warn Congress about this. There was a person I remember seeing, and he was like, you don't understand, you know, like I've never seen anything like this. You know, in all my years working, the ability that a company like Google and Facebook have to influence the public, you cannot underestimate it. It's something else, you know? So I think that's clear, right? I want to get to one more thing, and then get a little more off topic, maybe just a little more personal with you, since I have you. You know, when you had gone through this, it must have been an ordeal. It must have been like pretty fucking stressful, you know, and you decided to do the right thing, even in the face of all that stress. And you knew that it was risky. I mean, you knew that you were blowing the whistle on a company that had become the most powerful company in the world for all intents and purposes. So these companies, they don't hesitate to do certain things that, you know, a person might never consider, because it's a decision for them. It's a corporate decision, and human lives are not a factor in that. So I just remember in your book when you said, you know, you had taken O'Keefe's advice, O'Keefe from Project Veritas, and he had told you, and I've heard this many times from many people, you know, go public, you know, go the way of go get in front of the spotlight, and because then they lose their power over you, because it's anything that happens to you after that. So you finally took O'Keefe's advice, and you sat down with him. And then I just want to fast forward you to October of 2019, you know, when you were invited to the American Priorities Conference, the AmFest in Florida, and you were a featured speaker. And you know, you spoke to them, and you found yourself facing not one but two standing ovations. And I just, you know, how was that for you in that moment, being received the way you were, and people standing on their feet to thank you for sacrificing what you did to bring this information out to the public?
I mean, it almost feels like I'm an imposter, you know, because like my ideas were pretty much like rejected by my close friends and family, you know, and now it's like on the other side of that. I mean, they still think that, you know, I'm
crazy.
I mean, yeah, they're in the matrix, right? And
yeah.
And so now it's like I am without, I feel like I'm adrift without my rock solid tribe. Like everything's changed for me now since I've come out with this. And it reminds me how grateful I am that there's other people that also see and understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And they recognize how close we were to being under this system.
Yeah.
And it's like we got really close to Google just sneaking this out and just like, you know, dumping all of this on us, you know, really quickly and gaslighting everyone saying, oh no, it's not happening. There's no, it's right. Reality has a bias or something like that. And we came really close. And then, you know, threw out all the paperwork and, and foiled their plans.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, you did.
and I'm so grateful that other people see that and appreciate that. And that makes me hopeful that we can get this message out, and that by getting this message out, we can, through knowing what they're doing, push back on it. Like every single time we get on the computer, we make conscious decisions. All these thousands of decisions that we make, hundreds, adds up to whether we decide to feed the beast or whether we decide to use something that is American first, or at least not totally freaking evil.
Right.
Right. And it's like, that person, it's like, oh, I don't like Google. Google sucks. I'm going to use an alternative.
DuckDuckGo.
Yeah. And, it's like, and now it's gone mainstream. Like Joe Rogan's like, oh, don't use Google. They're evil. And I'm just like, yes. Right.
Yeah,
like, yes, they are. They're
I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
Don't use Google.
Like, yeah, don't use Google. They're an evil thing. And so it's like, how do we start diverting these clicks away from like YouTube to something like BitChute and Rumble and Brighteon and Odyssey and, Spreaker and all these other alternative platforms? How do we not get on Gmail and we use something else like Proton Mail, even though they don't have the same sort of protections that they claim to? But the thing is that we've got to get people used to diversifying and being more inclusive in the software that they use in order to communicate with one another.
Right.
Because ultimately this fight is going to be, it's going to need to be leveraged off of the free market.
Exactly.
Like if we're all using one system, then that's a really, easy single point of failure that, the central banking cartel can just apply pressure through various means. And then
never
boom,
going
all
to
of a sudden
decentralize it.
we're in a technocracy. Right.
Yeah.
But by pushing it out, by decentralizing it, that is a path to salvation. And for the people to hear hear what I have to say about this, to see the danger of Google, to see the danger of centralized technology, and to realize we need to do this decentralized, whether it's money, whether it's, the
food,
way that we
money, you name
everything.
It. I mean, now more than ever. People have no idea. They don't stop and think. And I have, because I live in New York City for now, and I'm in the middle of it. This is madness here, Zach. You wouldn't believe this fucking place if you haven't been here in the last year and a half, but it's still crazy.
Where are you at?
I'm in New York City, man.
Okay. Oh yeah. Crazy town.
Yeah, it's totally crazy town. You got people sitting in Central Park on a blanket 30 feet from the nearest person in a plastic mask. It's literally insane, but that's beside the point. I guess it's not beside the point, but the point is that the programming is strong, right? You can't deny its strength. But I want to move on. I want to get into something a little lighter, and have a little fun with you before we call it a night. But I think you'll enjoy this question. But if you could recommend a book for everyone on the planet to read, a book that profoundly changed your life, what would you recommend?
Animal Farm. Really quick read too. And you can read it in one sitting.
Yes.
It's like 120 pages, or even in the text is like really big.
Yeah.
And it's essentially almost like a short story. And it's about the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, played by animals on a farm, right? And so they're all like equality, and then like the horse gives the most work because he's the strongest, and he is the true believer in this communist. They don't call it communist, but it's all hinted, right? It's an allegory. And it's really sad at the end, because the horse, after giving his total life to the system, he dies, and then they sell him to the glue factory so they can extract the last bit of essence out of this true believer.
Yeah.
And it was I read that and I was just like, man, the best part is at the end, they keep on using the words equal. They keep on changing the definition of equal throughout the whole book. And so at the end, spoiler alert, they basically invert the meaning of the word to such an extent that it has the exact opposite meaning that it did before. In fact, they said everyone is equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And that's like the clincher, like when the whole thing gets, turned around. And it was that manipulation of language that I saw.
Boy, they're doing that now, aren't they? My God, are they doing that now?
My God. Yeah.
It's like every time you turn around, they've changed. They've literally gone to the length of changing the very definition to continue to further their narrative, to continue to prop up a completely failed narrative. They can't change enough definitions to keep this narrative propped up. It is so full of shit. It is such
like
a house
the whole
of cards.
thing with the herd immunity definition.
Naturally,
like first it started off as natural, and then they said it could be natural or vaccine. And I had this fight with like Miriam, this argument, this debate, because she's like, they can't change. I was like, well, actually, technically, vaccine immunity would be part of the herd immunity calculation. But what really was weird was when they literally changed the definition of herd immunity to only include those that have been vaccinated. And I'm just like,
dude, they fucking did that. I mean, I'm sure they had Google's help, but they did that, God, Google, when I read what they did with Trump's tweet, I mean, first of all, talk about big tech committing treason. I mean, they just one after the other. Twitter certainly guilty, and I remember, just can you like really briefly tell everyone what Google did when Trump, one of his most famous and retweeted tweets was about how do you say that? Cofefe. And everyone railed on him and said that it was a typo, but it turns out if it wasn't a typo, Google was going to make sure that it was remembered as a typo. And what Google did they literally took the word and deleted it from the internet so that people could not reference or find the meaning of this the way it was intended to be interpreted, because it was an Arabic word. Is that right? Am I getting this right?
So here's the tweet right here, right? Despite the negative constant press, Cofefe, and it turns out that a whole bunch of people went online and found that there was a translation of the word Cofefe from Arabic to English. And that translation was, we will stand up. And so when you look at this, it said, despite the constant negative press, we will stand up. That's the decode of the tweet.
Right. So they took that and they fucking deleted it. They literally
but here's how the propaganda works, right? Like, you want to see some magic? Let's see some black magic, and look up the definition of black magic. One of the definitions is an influence operation. It's not the, twiddle your fingers and the mop starts coming alive and cleaning up the room. It's a literal influence operation is one of the definitions of black magic. So let's look at some black magic here. Okay. The New York Times writes a hit piece saying that Cofefe is being mistakenly identified and that it's actually a nonsense word. And so because of that New York Times article, the same day right here, Google writes this letter saying that actually we got it wrong because it actually doesn't make any sense because, when would the New York Times ever get something wrong?
Right. So because people were using Google Translate to find the definition of what Trump tweeted, right?
Yes.
And so Google had a problem because that tweet was, cryptic and eloquent, and people were saying, oh, he's saying this. Yeah. And Google did not want Trump coming off as anything but, a buffoon and an ass. And, he was the person they were painting to be the villain. Villains don't write things like with that tweet. That doesn't sound like something a villain would write. And so they had a problem, but they went to work on it. And they did some black magic on it, and they go ahead.
And then what happened is that from that article, they wrote this bug report right here, which was like we need to get rid of this word. We're going to delete it. But they didn't actually say we're going to delete it. What they did instead was they said, we're going to replace it with an emoticon, a shruggy. That's like, I don't know what you mean, right?
They fucking replaced it with an emoticon.
Right. Which actually would have been funny, except when they replaced it with the emoticon, they're like, actually, let's just delete the word. And let's delete the word again because the AI found another way to translate it. So they had to delete it twice. And the word dropped off from the internet. And from that, missing definition, the media could now go out and claim that Trump was mentally unstable because he's tweeting nonsense like Cofefe. And it's like me on the inside is saying, it's you guys. You guys literally took it off the internet, making it nonsense in real time so that you could remove a democratically elected president. I mean, once I saw that, I was like, I've had it. This is too corrupt. This is criminal. It's fraud against the American public. It's fraud against their stockholders. It's fraud against Congress and everything that they said about never delving into this. They were being completely evil. And it was like, at that point, that's when I was really close to blowing the whistle. And that's the Cofefe story.
Cofefe became the catalyst for calling Trump mentally, insufficient and calling for his removal of office. And the way that they took this and then tried to leverage it into this other thing was nothing short of remarkable and ridiculous. But that's the lovely power of editing. We're going to show some of the highlights of that, of Google's black magic. But next question. If you had an hour left on the planet, what would you do?
I would eat all the jerky that I can't eat because it's got soy sauce, and soy sauce is infected with gluten. Because I'd be like, screw it, I'm not going to have to suffer from the massive migraine that's going to follow from all of the wheat. So I would go right to town and I would get a belly full of delicious, nutritious jerky from my friend Pete Santilli. And that's how I would, because what else are you going to do, right? Like sit around, maybe play some video games. I could play the game Hades, ironically, at the end of the world. How cool would that be? Right?
That'd be ironic.
Be like edgy.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do with 1 hour left.
That's cool, man. What do you think? Well, first of all, have you ever had a supernatural experience, whether it was like maybe you thought it was a ghost, or did you ever see a UFO? Or
I saw a UFO. Yeah, that's when I became, because I was always like, that's dumb. Like they're just seeing things. Yeah. It's always the crazy people that's seeing that. So I was like, I was like so against conspiracy theories. Like when I was in my early 20s, that it was just like I looked down on those people. And then one time I was walking in Eugene, Oregon, at the University of Oregon, towards the what was called Duck's Village, and I saw this what I thought was a planet or something. Yeah, that was like, I was like, wow, is that Venus or Mercury, or and then I was like, it seems bigger than those planets, right? Because it was like burning hot, like a planet reflecting the sun, and then all of a sudden it just moved across like the sky, like 15 degrees, just like immediately. It didn't even like speed up. It was just like that, and then it like took a dead stop. And my girlfriend was like next to me, and I was just like, "Did you see that?" And she's like, "Yeah." And we're just watching it, like dumbfounded, and then it just goes like out, like, and like curves out as it like goes out, and it's almost like a reverse shooting star. And it did that, and I went, holy crap, is that what we think it is? And she was like, yeah. And then I even was like, well, was that a dream? So I messaged her about it.
How did you feel when you saw it, and then once it moved and then you saw it take off? What was the feeling?
It was like, okay, so UFOs are real. And I was really into physics. So I was like, So if they're real, then what is that technology? And I'm smart enough to try to figure out what that technology is.
Yeah.
And then over the years, I sort of like pieced together what exactly those UFOs are doing.
Yeah.
They basically use like an offshoot of the true physical universe, which Tesla imagined, which was the ethereal universe, where
Of course,
the whole realm that we live in is filled with a very highly almost non-existent
That's right.
viscosity, extremely high pressure medium that electromagnetic waves travel through, right? And for whatever, we don't know much about this fluid other than it's how light propagates and the electric field exists and magnetism. And so I started looking at these papers sort of as a hobby to try to figure out what could cause these. And then like after 2016, all these like really weird papers, these patents started coming in.
Yeah, I saw
about these UFOs. And I was reading a lot of these UFOs, and they actually like talked about the density of the ether being able to be changed on a rapidly oscillating magnetic field.
Right.
And I went, what, really? And
anti-gravitics, they've been around.
Yeah, electrogravitics.
Yeah.
And then I was like, if this is true, then I bet that there's some other mainstream, paper that shows that some sort of, electric effect, electromass effect happens with, electrons.
Right.
And to my surprise, I found a paper that said that when you take an electron and oscillate it in the terahertz range, so 1 trillion cycles a second,
right,
that at that threshold, the electron starts to lose mass.
Wow.
And that was like, I was like, okay, well, there it is. Like you just kind of cycle it really fast. It seems to lose mass. And then people started saying that you can make an engine out of it. And the way that you do it is that, like, let's say you just shoot the mass, the electron at like one way, and it's got like the full weight. Let's say it's like 100% weight. And then you oscillate it the other way and shoot it back. Well, that terahertz oscillation will mean that it's now got like 90% of its weight, right? And if you do that and you shove it back, then what happens is that in one direction, you've actually got more force. When you put the other direction, the forces don't actually cancel out. So you get a net direction in one force, which means you can have a massless accelerating thrusting engine.
That's right.
That's like fully contained. And then it's just like, and we see little glimpses of this, I believe now with, the impossible EM drive. I'm like, no, that's just, they're like oscillating electrons or something in this chamber, and it's tossing off waves in a certain direction such that the thing experiences just a little bit of thrust. And they keep on dogging, like, oh no, it turns out that one of the cables wasn't plugged in right or something like this. It's almost like a Men in Black, like, oh, it's just swamp gas. Refracting off red light.
Look at this blinky red light.
Right. And they're like, don't pay attention to the EM drive. Dude, right. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I asked myself, well, why are they doing this? Like, why? And it's like, well, because they've got their whole, they got Space Force, right? Like they've got these.
I mean, Space Force is just the first public. Yeah. They're going to start asking for more money.
Of the iceberg. Right.
That's the next false flag, if you ask me. Whatever comes first, but the Space Force is I don't know if you follow the work of Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm a big fan of his. If you've ever heard of him, he had a phenomenal. One of my favorite documentaries is called Unacknowledged, which also details the federal banking cartel and the way that the industries have kept technology suppressed. And he's organized, talking about whistleblowers, he's had like over 100 witnesses come forward from black ops programs that, all the money that the Pentagon is missing, it's not missing, it's gone into these black ops programs.
Yes.
And the military industrial complex is responsible for almost $21 trillion missing. And the Pentagon has never submitted a budget, even though every other branch of government has to submit a budget every year. The Pentagon is just like, no, we're not going to do that. We can't do that. And that's because the money that they put into these programs and the technology that they've been sitting on is, it's nothing short of extraterrestrial. You wouldn't know the difference now, but you got to check out this documentary. It's one of my favorites, called Unacknowledged, right? And then he's got a bunch of other ones.
I think I've seen it. That's the limited disclosure hangout, right?
Yeah, basically. And you know, everything that they're doing now, when you see like, oh, the Pentagon's verify. Oh, really? So we should believe it since the Pentagon is telling us to believe it? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Talk about your next fucking false flag. They're lining up to ask for more money to fight another invisible war. I mean, it's no different than what's happening now, except it'll be directly into the military industrial complex. They have the technology now, Zach, that they fly a UFO and have it hover above New York City for 3 hours for everyone to take pictures. And most people would never know the difference, that it was a vehicle that we made, that is a reproduction vehicle that they made from tech that they found from crash sites and or shot down with one of our, you know, energy weapons systems. So it's just crazy what they've been sitting on. But
yeah, and you know what really scares me too is that they might fly down like a ship, and then it like hangs over 3 days, and they're like, oh my God, what's happening? The media covers it, and then it finally
False
lands, and then everyone brings out their cameras for first contact, and then like out walks like a space transgender Jesus, right? And the media declares him, oh my God, Jesus has returned. And then like all the churches go in on it. And then everyone's like, oh my God, the Messiah's returned. And then like in India, like Vishnu returns, and they get their own little like customized religious psyop that binds their religious people under the hypnotism. And this is the thing that I fear, is that they'll bring some sort of space Jesus down. You know, I'm not even kidding. Like, you think that I'm joking, but I'm not. Like,
they won't do that, dude. They won't do that. You know what I'm afraid they'll do? That they very well may do. I don't think that they're going to do it. I don't think they'll have to. They'll be able to. I'm afraid that they're going to stage a false flag, like on the same scale as a 9/11. Only they're going to use one of their ships. They're going to use one of the. I mean, they have a fleet of them. They have hundreds of them, Zach, and they've had them for years. They have them in every shape or size. And some of them are outfitted with weapon systems that even the government doesn't have access to.
Right. And I mean, it's like, if that happens, like,
if they want to do that to get the money, they could do it in a heartbeat.
Like if an alien race declares war on our transgendered space Jesus, you know, and then finally like the whole planet has to unite to fight the space aliens
under one government,
guys. It's all time to unite in brotherly love and freedom for the planet. And the communism, don't worry about that.
So that's the thing, and that's why I love people like Dr. Greer, because he's on the front lines of this, trying to get people to be aware of that. When they do talk about the quote alien threat, they are lying through their teeth, because there is no alien threat. Any civilization that has the capacity to travel in an interdimensional craft has not come here in anything but peace. And probably, you know, when they take a good look around, they probably are like, we got to get the fuck out of here. Do you see what they do to that Jesus guy? You know what I mean? Like, give me a break.
No, I think they're already here. Like, if you think about it rationally, I mean, this is my conclusion, and I'll share my theories with you. Look, like, if it's probable that we've got aliens, like, there's 100 billion planets, suns, stars in the galaxy. Okay. In our galaxy. So, out of 100 billion of those stars, one of them's got life. That's, are you kidding me? Way advanced than we are. In fact, there's probably millions of, you know, sentient life forms in circling stars.
Just in the Milky Way. Bro.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we just have no clue.
and the thing is that like technology is this like exponential curve. So it's like, you know, there's going to be some sort of advanced life that just arrived, just came into existence 1 billion years before us, and they've got 1 billion years head start.
Oh my God.
And could you imagine the technology that they would have? Like, they would be able to like warp and go from like one side. It's like the size of the galaxy wouldn't even matter to them. They would just have so much incomparable technology. And so the question then is that, okay, well, if they can zip around whenever they want, then where are they? And if I was some alien life form of incomprehensible technology, then maybe I might come up with some sort of prime directive where we can bore in and take control of a planet territorially, but then give some sort of sovereign land rights to the local inhabitants of that planet. And so, if you just look at it from a logical standpoint, I think that this galaxy is colonized by,
I just don't. I see the evolution of a species, and I don't believe that, I don't believe that a species becomes spacefaring and is allowed to advance out into the galaxy until they get their shit together. And that's why, humans will continue to make war and enslave each other here. And until we heal and integrate that deep-seated program, that biological programming that is in us in a lot of ways, we're never going to be, accepted into any kind of federation or galactic. We're never going to have the welcoming committee because we can't be trusted. I mean,
Right.
There's a ton.
Like everyone needs to get on the same page if we're going to play with the big boys.
That's exactly right. And it's the moment we do, they're waiting. That's what I believe. That's what I know intuitively, and this is kind of what I love and what I study and what I meditate on. And a lot of the metaphysics that I listen to come from people who, claim to have a very strong connection to some of these other species that we evolved from in many ways, and that our DNA is a direct lineage of many of the most advanced species in the galaxy already, and that we are this amazing experiment, and that's why everyone has a front row seat to Earth, especially now with what's going on. But
right, like a hybridization of some star seed that came down and then mixed in with some,
and one of the most incredible hybridizations this human body is, and species can't wait to see what happens as our DNA begins to unfurl and we start to realize our true lineage, which is nothing short of amazing. Right now, we're this young species. We're fucking poisoning. We don't know better about our food. We don't know how to treat each other. We're this very young, we're kind of like a toddler, right? And we have all this technology that's come out very expediently over the last, it's like when a 4-year-old is much bigger than most 4-year-olds, he tends to be like a bull in a china factory. That's kind of like where we're at right now. And I just feel like as we start to perceive more and we see, like, look, this is the first time these companies have been able to get so big, right? And I have to believe that it's the last time, because human consciousness and evolution, we're not going to allow for that kind of rule, right? The human spirit needs to be free, and the moment we feel safe, we will demand freedom. And I just hope that people continue to see through the bullshit. And thanks to people like you and what you've done and what you've had the courage to do, it's a little easier for people to see the truth of what's happening. So I am eternally grateful for you for what you have done, Zach, because you've done a great service to, it's a global thing. So I have to say the world, and I'm not trying to flatter your ego, because, ego is what gets us in trouble a lot of times. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't grateful and that I didn't have a lot of respect and admiration for what you did.
Thank you very much, Faust. I am grateful that you had me on your podcast so we could go deep. It's always refreshing to talk with someone who gets it, and you definitely got it, and you know what we're up against. And and I want to say that you're gonna like what's gonna happen next. So
Cool.
Stay tuned. And for those of you out there, follow me on twitter.com/perpetualmaniac, also at Getter, also at Gab, under the gamer tag Perpetual Maniac. Sorry,
Nice.
That became my sort of my username, but hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So follow me everywhere, Perpetual Maniac.
We're going to include links to all Zach's sites and social media sites, so it'll be easier for you. You'll
see the links, see the GoogleLeaks at zachvorhies.com. And if you like the book and you want to see a preview of it, go to googleleaksbook.com or just search for it on Amazon and look inside. I guarantee it's going to be an eye opener. The stuff that I saw,
it's a fast read. You got a front row seat to the essentially a takeover that happened at Google. You'll see exactly how it happened, why it happened, how it happened, and you'll see the programs and algorithms and AI that Google has put to work in keeping you from thinking for yourself about what you're hearing. And I highly recommend it. It's a great book.
Yep. GoogleLeaks, get it now. Bestseller at Amazon.com. So
yeah. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate your time, bro. We'll do it again one day and we'll go even further out.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very
Awesome, man.
much.
Appreciate it, brother. You take care.
You take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.